Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs Podcast, where innovation meets sustainability. Building a better tomorrow today. We interview changemakers and visionary leaders redefining success for the planet. Here you'll find inspiring stories and solutions that matter. Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the New Earth Entrepreneur Show. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Scott Wharton, CEO of Tandem PV. Scott is a seasoned entrepreneur with a track record of scaling innovative startups. Under his leadership, Tandem PV is pioneering the development of next generation, I'm going to need your help with this one, perovskite silicone tandem solar panels, aiming to revolutionize the solar industry and combat climate change. We'll explore Scott's journey, the technological advancements at Tandem PV, and their vision for a sustainable future. Welcome, Scott.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here. Eager and excited to learn more about Tandem PV and your mission to revolutionize solar technology. Tandem PV focuses on developing disruptive next-generation solar panels. Could you share more about the inspiration behind founding the company and how your mission has evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm not a founder, but I'm the CEO. I've been here about 18 months. The founders started the company in 2016. It came out of PhD work out of Stanford, but perovskites are basically this material, this revolutionary material that's going to make a much better and cheaper solar panel. So just some attributes of perovskites. It's a crystal structure that's 200 times thinner than traditional silicon panels. It's a lot easier to manufacture. It doesn't require any rare earth metals or minerals. In fact, we can make it in a lab here in California. The idea is going to be better and cheaper, and we could, take what's largely a Chinese phenomenon. More than 90% of solar technology today comes out of China, and our plan is to move it back to the U.S. and Silicon Valley. And do we do well, like innovate and create a completely disruptive new technology?
It does sound disruptive. I love to hear about that kind of localizing more materials and not having to be such a intensive process to get these materials, something that you can make in the lab. And Tandem PV's mission emphasizes solving climate change through innovative solar technology. How does Tandem PV's approach align with this goal, and what impact have you observed so far?
So this is my fifth startup scale up in a row. So I like to joke that there's clearly something wrong with me, that I want to keep doing this over and over again. And I started working in solar many decades ago when I was in business school, but the market was too early. So I pivoted and basically did some telecom video conferencing startups that all did pretty well. At the same time, I had been following the solar industry and looking at climate change. And when I thought about what I could do to help contribute in my own way, I thought, well, most of the world's new energy is going to come from solar. And perovskite is widely believed to be the future of solar. In fact, there was a market research report that said that by 2040, more than 90% of all solar will be perovskites. So clearly the industry is saying this is the future. So if we're going to move to solar and clean energy, and this was the leading company, I thought, what would be, for me, I couldn't think of a better place to be to help solve climate change. Now we're early stage, early in the process, but I hope we're the tip of the spear of really making energy cheaper and faster and getting to net zero much faster than we're doing today.
Wonderful. And developing tandem perovskite panels with 26% efficiency, significant achievement. What technological innovations have been key to reaching this milestone?
Yeah, so first of all, I think since we filled this out, we're now at 28%. So the industry standard solar panels, in contrast, are about 21%. So we're about a third more power in the same size as existing panels. And then the current silicon panels, even with the laws of physics, can only get to about 26%. So we're already ahead of where that will ever be. The reason why we're called Tandem is we're basically creating a solar panel sandwich. So on the top layer, you've got this perovskite layer that I described. On the bottom layer, we basically take standard off-the-shelf silicon cells and we integrate it into a full panel that's a tandem where we let some of the sunlight through, and we can capture basically more sunlight collectively with these two solar panel collectors than we can with one. That's why the company is called Tandem, and that's actually a generic name for the category. The potential for this is we could get up to 45 or 50% through a tandem approach, which is why people say this is going to be the future. And like I said, we're already a third better. And we think we're going to break 30% within the next year, which would be a huge milestone. And then, of course, if you can drive the cost down, the fact that we're not using any rare earth metals and minerals and making it in a lab, that's all the indication why we plan on making energy a lot cheaper. And I would say part of what attracted me to this is I think a lot of people talk about solving climate change as just a transition, but I don't think that's enough for a couple of reasons. One is if you're outside the US and Europe and you live in Africa or Latin America, you don't want to just have like a light bulb and a refrigerator. Like you want to live like us. So we need to be able to provide something that is lower cost to make it more fair for everyone to move to solar energy versus fossil fuels. That's number one. Number two is I think most of the listeners here know there's a huge explosion in electricity requirements with EVs, AI. So I don't believe for a minute that we're just going to transition to be flat. We're going to need a ton more electricity. And I feel like it's kind of our mission to be able to do it in a way that's not just transitioning to something that is the same cost, but radically cheaper so that everybody can participate. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's there's definitely nuance to that whole transition conversation. Yeah, lots of different changing factors and variables too with the energy consumption. And one next question for you: scaling up your first manufacturing plant is a current challenge. How are you navigating this process, and what strategies are in place to overcome obstacles in scaling production?
Well, I'd say we're following a classic path for a company that makes physical things. So right now we have a manufacturing line that's small and it's in our offices in San Jose, and we make like 150 panels a week. Now they're relatively small size because they're kind of more lab scale, but they're fully formed in that they do everything that a bigger solar panel would do. So the next phase is building a bigger factory, which we're underway, that would have a full size solar panel. So they're usually about the size of a door, 1 by 2 meters. We're in the process of doing that. But ultimately what we want to do is build it at a giga scale, kind of like the Elon Musk Tesla factories, where you're building these massive factories that will have the ability to have an impact on climate change. So we're kind of we're at stage 1. We're in the process of going to stage 2, and then setting us up for the stage 3.
Amazing. And that future vision trajectory, you aim to be a primary driver in solving climate change via better, cheaper solar panels. Could you elaborate on your plans to achieve this vision and how you foresee Tandem PV's role in the broader renewable energy landscape?
Yeah, I think part of what we're doing right now is we're transitioning from being primarily an R&D company to more of a commercial and manufacturing company. So we're bringing in the people and the resources that we need to kind of finalize proving this out on a bigger scale, signing up customers, et cetera. I think we're leveraging the fact that we've got a really smart team. Our 2 founders have PhDs from Stanford in material science and applied physics. And now we've been bringing on a small group of people on the commercial side like me to help scale the company and do, what you do in Silicon Valley, where you make that transition from being, more science and R&D oriented to scaling a company. I think this is the fun part.
A serial startup entrepreneur. And still looking ahead, are there any new innovations or partnerships that Tandem PV is exploring to enhance its impact on the solar industry?
Well, I would say there are a bunch of partnerships. One is we're selling to utility scale customers. So I think you could sell to the rooftop market, but what most people probably don't know is that more than 80% of the solar market today in the US is utility scale. I think that's a way to scale up faster. The other thing I like about it is we're taking the same existing panel. It looks and feels almost the same, but having a third better performance. So it's kind of like we call it a drop-in product. So it's a lot easier for our customers to buy it in that it's just the same thing but better. No real major behavior changes. And then we're going to partner with different people in the ecosystem. So people who make silicon cells, people who make glass, people who make some other things. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is really hard and heavy science, but it's not that complicated from a putting these things together point of view.
And as you work towards scaling and commercialization, are there specific areas where additional support, partnerships, or resources would be beneficial in helping Tandem PV achieve its objectives?
Like any startup where you're making physical goods, you need more money and people and things, and you need to transition your skill set from being primarily research oriented to more manufacturing and process oriented. But we're going through that process right now.
Yeah, this is another rinse and repeat for you. You've not your first rodeo.
Well, there's always something different in the elements of starting up. What I found is that what is similar is that human beings are the same. So there are going to be some people that are risk averse. There are going to be some people that are going to wait for things to happen. And for those who are listening who've read Crossing the Chasm, I think we're following the classic trend that you go after your innovators, then your early adopters, and your early majority. That I think is true no matter what industry you're in, and people behave almost strikingly the same way. So I think you can kind of leverage that and that pattern recognition to understand about how do you do that scale up. And then I think the other things they're saying are you need to get good people around you. You need to motivate them. You need to excite them. And I think those things are often, they're the same thing, even if you're in a different industry or different technology.
In the educating of the broader public, if you do any, how do you approach educating the public and policymakers about the benefits and potential of perovskite silicone tandem solar panels? And do you see opportunities to deepen this engagement?
Absolutely. I mean, I think just the fact that, when we started the interview, I think most people in the world have not heard of perovskites. I suspect that in the next 2-3 years, everyone in the world's going to hear about it. It's going to be this major transformation. So part of what's been fun for me is to join an industry where almost nobody outside of a handful of sophisticated researchers knew about it to help spread the word on what we're doing. So that's number one. I think the second thing is explain it in a way that makes sense. That's kind of not so technical that people can understand what the value is. And then I think part of it is explaining why I think there's value in having cheaper solar, but also I think why there's value for the United States to not be 100% dependent on China for, if this is going to be all of our future energy or most of it's going to come from solar and a little bit of wind and batteries, do we want to get that all from China, or do we want to have some of our own technology control? And I mean, it sounds like almost a rhetorical question, but today, if you look at the way we're operating, we do get almost all of that from China today. So I think part of the goal is, and I think this is a bipartisan agreement that we want to have that. It's a good thing. So part of it is having security for the U.S. Part of it is driving to net zero. And I think part of it's I believe in the philosophy that you can't just yell at people to have them behave better from a climate point of view. In some ways, it's almost counterproductive. I'll give you an example. If you tell people don't use as much fossil fuels, and somebody is really diligent about it and they turn down their thermostat, there's going to be someone else going, cool, my gas bill's cheaper, I'm going to use more. Like, it doesn't actually even work. So the only thing that really works is innovation and ultimately making it in someone's personal interest, almost selfish, to kind of do the right thing. That's what kind of attracted me to this business versus public policy or something else, because I think we're going to change people's behavior by making it in their interest to use solar. Not because we're yelling at them or they're bad people, or I don't think that works.
Right. More carrot, less stick.
Yeah, more carrot, less stick.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations in like green building spaces, and it is just a lot of times like what's going to help drive that more sustainable material usage, and it's just the financial incentives, or because a lot of people, they have maybe ideals or they want to be more green, but the economics of it, they're just going to say, hey, it's just easier to do this other cheaper, more quick, affordable option. So I think if you can really just lessen the friction for folks to adopt these more sustainable, it just becomes a no-brainer.
It's just the fundamentals of capitalism. People do what's in their own self-interest, and there are some people that will do things for the good of the world and the environment, but that's not usually the way things become mainstream.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what excites you most about the future of Tandem PV and the impact you're making in the solar industry?
I think what excites me most is that this really has the ability to affect everyone in the world. So it's like my last job, I built up the world's biggest video conferencing hardware business at Logitech. And part of what I loved about it is almost everybody today like this is using video conferencing. So there was something really neat about having something that both was useful, but that I could walk around any office in the world. And oftentimes I would see the fruits of me and what my team built. And that was really gratifying and exciting. And I think we're going to see something similar here, where we're going to see our stuff powering, hopefully lots of parts of the world. And, even for us to drive innovation, it'll hopefully incent other people to go faster in this area, which will be good for the world to have more competition. So I like the ability of just seeing that impact and everybody go, oh yeah, it's not like some widget or something or some software they don't understand. I think everybody understands electricity and the value that solar can bring. So in some ways, it's just a very pure manifestation of what we're going to need to do as a society to move to net zero. It's in the sweet spot. It's part of the fun.
Yeah, it seems like a great spot to be in. Any broader topic or just any part of Tandem PV that I didn't think to ask on, or anything that you'd otherwise want to share on in these topics?
Well, I think we talked about a bunch of topics: the economics, the social justice of making it cheaper. I think we talked about bringing stuff back from China. I mean, I will just say one of the things that's fun aside is because this is my fifth startup in a row. I think one of the things that is the same is you're always competing against some group or idea of someone that people say you can never win against. So in my early days of telecom, there were big companies like Lucent, Alcatel, and Ericsson and Huawei. They're like, you can never beat them. And then we did. And then we started with the world's first cloud video conferencing service. And people are like, you can never beat Cisco. And then we did. And then we did the same thing at Logitech. We basically became market leader. I think in this case, there's a fear irrationally in the climate space of you can never beat China. And I just think that's just fundamentally untrue. Like you can, not that you don't respect your competitors, but there's always a way for a startup to go innovate and outcompete someone that's bigger and slower, especially when you have a disruptive technology. So I see a lot of the patterns of what I've seen before where people say, you can't beat ... And I feel very confident that we're on our way to being successful in doing that. And I think it's always really fun when people say, you can't do, how did you do it? That's kind of part of the transition that we're in. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation with people a couple years later where they're like, how did you do it?
Yeah, you seem poised for it. It seems like you got the experience under your belt. You've had a successful track record and an industry that you seem ready to invest the time and energy into to help make it happen.
And a great team. I mean, you always need a great group of people around you. I fundamentally believe that if you have a relatively small, smart, passionate team, you could move mountains. I mean, that's the American dream of how do you change things with a small, motivated group. And I think it's kind of what we're doing. In some ways, it's not rocket science. In some ways, it's really hard. I mean, you can see I'm excited and having fun about this, and we'll see how it goes. This is the fun part.
Yeah, I love it, and I do. You know, my own perception or ideas about it, but it does seem you're not being dragged through this process. It seems like something inspired to help continue to move forward. If there is anything else too, and like it's kind of like startup entrepreneurial, it doesn't have to be associated with Tandem PV, just in your own personal experience, anything that you want to share on for the New Earth entrepreneur community, invitation, opportunity here. If there is anything that jumps out as like there's a little golden nugget for consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking a lot with entrepreneurs, and I like kind of sharing some of my experience and mentoring some people who are younger and earlier in their entrepreneurial journey. And I love this concept of ikage, this Japanese concept that what people should do. And that concept is roughly that there's three things. You want to find something that you're passionate about. You want to find something that you're good at, and you want to find something that people will pay you for. So if you think about it, if you do something that you're passionate about, but maybe you suck at it, like you're not going to be very good at it anyway. That would be disappointing. If you find something that you're good at and you're passionate about, but there's no money, I mean, you could be a musician or play sports, but maybe you can't make a living on it. That's going to be difficult for your life because you're going to struggle with that. You don't want to do something that only makes you money, because if you do that, you're just not going to be excited about it or passionate about it. So I tell people, try to find the sweet spot where, and that's what I try to do in my career. When I haven't really overplanned it so much as I've tried to think about things that I get really good at, that I'm passionate about, but also things that I could, that I'd like to monetize it too as a capitalist. And I think if you think about things from those three ways, it's going to be very hard for you not to be successful if you find something that lines up with those three things. I think unfortunately, a lot of people do things that they think is just a good idea, but they're not very excited about it. And I've also seen people do things where they go, oh, I'm going to be an accountant and I'm not very good at it, or I'm going to do computer engineering because my parents told me I should do engineering. But it's not what they're good at or their sweet spot. And then you see people who work in areas where they want to do something, but they just can't maintain it because they can't make any money at it. So if you can find that sweet spot, I think you could do good for the world and for yourself. That's kind of what I've done. I think it's some people just try to do one or two, and I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely, the blend. And I've even heard there's probably a couple different ways to look at it. There's a fourth one I've heard in that as well, about like what the world needs in that whole assemblage of what you're good at, what you can get paid for, what makes you happy, and what the world needs.
Yeah.
Because when you can blend that all together, you've really got yourself set up for momentum and not the struggle of again having to like pull yourself dredge through and not have to be like a starving artist or somebody who's passionate about what they're doing but not being paid for and being compensated in a way that's going to help them to prolong and continue.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully hopefully what lines up is that the world needs something. They're actually willing to give you money for that as a value. That's not always the case for a lot of things, but for some things it is, especially because we're talking about entrepreneurship and not just hobbies. So I think that's why I've targeted toward that. So ideally you can line those things up. And for me, I feel like, I've just hit the jackpot where I don't really have to compromise. I feel like I'm just following my dream.
Love it. Love it. Well, Scott, I appreciate you for sharing your insights. I look forward to hearing about how you and Tan continue to innovate and lead in advancing solar technology for a sustainable future.
I do too. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.